Welcome to Daily News Simplified, an answer to what, why, and how of newspaper reading. Today, we are going to discuss the important issues appearing in the Hindu newspaper dated 19th April 2018. Let's begin. The first news appears on page number 1. The news reads, No pollution reduction targets in Central Plan. Now, this news is about National Clean Air Program. So we will see this particular news. Let us go through some of these questions so as to understand why this news becomes important from your prelims examination point of view. And we will see another question which was asked earlier in 2016 in the UPSC prelims exam. Let's see these questions. Consider the following statements about National Air Quality Index. There are 7 categories of air quality index. So this statement wants you to know that how many categories of air quality index exists. Second, each of these categories is decided on the ambient concentration values of air pollutants and their likely health impacts. So this statement comprises of 2 parts about ambient concentration of values of air pollutants and likely health impacts. And third, the pollutants ammonia and lead are not included within air quality index. So this statement is also checking whether you know certain basic facts about air quality index. Let's come to the next question. Which of the following are correct about National Clean Air Program? Since this news is also pertaining to this National Clean Air Program, we will be seeing every details regarding to National Clean Air Program. So let us see what the statements are. First, to provide ambient air quality standard. Second, to augment and evolve effective air quality monitoring network in rural areas only. So we have to check this statement whether this particular National Clean Air Program is only for rural areas or it also applies to other areas. And third, to provide certification system for monitoring air quality. Hence, we also need to know whether this particular statement is correct or not. So let us come back to the question asked in the prelims examination of 2016, and it was with respect to the question which earlier discussed, that is National Air Quality Index. But they had asked in a very different format. Let's see. The question was, in the cities of our country, which among the following atmospheric gases are normally considered in calculating the value of air quality index? Options given were carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, nitrogen dioxide, sulfur dioxide, and methane, and various options were given. So in this particular question, they want you to know how many or what are the different atmospheric gases which are considered while calculating air quality index. So we will be seeing all these details with respect to National Clean Air Program. Let us see. So what is in this news? In this news, Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change has come out with a draft National Clean Air Program to tackle the increasing air pollution problem across the country in a comprehensive manner. However, the draft lacks its earlier set target of bringing down air pollution by 50%. Or this news is basically with respect to that this particular draft has not provided any set target with respect to reducing of air pollution, which earlier stated by the ministry was at 50%. So in this respect, let us understand about the goal, objectives, approach and important initiatives taken under this National Clean Air Program. The goal of this NCAP is to meet the prescribed annual average ambient air quality standards at all locations in the country in a stipulated time frame. The objectives of NCAP are to augment and evolve effective and proficient ambient air quality monitoring network across the country, to ensure comprehensive and reliable database, to have efficient data dissemination and public outreach mechanism, for timely measures for prevention and mitigation of air pollution, and for inclusive public participation in both planning and implementation of the programs and policies of the government with respect to air pollution, and to have feasible management plan for prevention, control and abatement of air pollution. And the approach for this particular program is collaborative, multi-scale and cross-sectoral coordination between relevant central ministries, state governments and local bodies in a participatory manner. With this respect, let us also understand about various initiatives which have been proposed under the NCAP or National Clean Air Program. One of the important initiatives under NCAP is to install manual monitoring stations to monitor air quality. It also aims to install continuous ambient air quality monitoring stations to monitor real time and peak concentration levels of critical pollutants. It also calls for identification of alternative technology for real time monitoring to be steered by Central Pollution Control Board. Another initiative under NCAP is to monitor rural monitoring network. It has been observed that even in rural areas, air quality has reduced significantly. Rural areas suffer from outdoor pollution as well as indoor pollution. Major sources of outdoor air pollution in rural areas are indiscriminate use of insecticides and pesticide spray and burning of wheat and paddy straw. Also, atmospheric concentration of ozone has been observed higher in rural areas as compared to urban areas. Another initiative includes monitoring of PM 2.5 particulate matters. As we know, particulates are the deadliest form of air pollution due to their ability to penetrate deep into lungs and blood streams, causing various health issues. Another initiative includes setting up of 10 city super network. This network may capture overall air quality dynamics of the nation and also impact of interventions, trends in air pollution, investigative measurements, etc. Other initiatives also includes setting up of Air Information Center, which shall be responsible for data analysis, interpretation, dissemination, including GIS platform, issuing bulletins, keeping track of international developments, and bringing out policy updates. It also provides for certification system for monitoring instruments. This body is expected to be accredited by Authentic Accreditation Service according to the existing ISO standards. In order to ensure use of new technologies to combat the rising challenge of air pollution in India, a separate component of Technology Assessment Cell has been envisaged under NCAP to evaluate the technologies for prevention, control, and abatement of air pollution. And also, international cooperation is sought, including sharing of international best practices on curbing air pollution. It is in this respect, let us also understand some of the basic qualities about National Air Quality Index. Primarily, there are 6 categories of air quality index. Each of these categories is based on ambient concentration of values of air pollutants and their likely health impacts. As you can see, in moderate may cause breathing discomfort to the people with lung disease such as asthma and discomfort to people with heart disease, children and other adults. In poor may cause breathing discomfort to people on prolonged exposure and discomfort to people with a heart disease. Very poor may cause respiratory illness to people on prolonged exposure. Effects may be more pronounced in people with lung and heart disease, whereas in severe category may cause respiratory effects even on healthy people and serious health impacts on people with lung or heart diseases. 8 pollutants which are measured under AQI are PM10, that is particulate matter 10, PM2.5, nitrogen dioxide, sulfur dioxide, carbon monoxide, ozone, ammonia, and lead. So these are the 8 pollutants which are measured under air quality index. These are important to remember because as we have seen, a question was asked in the year 2016. So after going through all these initiatives under NCAP, let us come back to the questions which we had discussed earlier. So this question, consider the following statements about National Air Quality Index. There are 7 categories of air quality index. No, we know that there are 6 categories of air quality index. Hence, this statement is incorrect. Each of these categories is decided on the ambient concentration values of air pollutants and their likely health impacts. As we saw, this statement is correct. The pollutants ammonia and lead are not included within AQI. No, they are included within AQI. As we have seen, this statement is also incorrect. So the question is, which of the statements given above is correct? So the correct answer would be 2 only. The next question, which of the following are correct about National Clean Air Program? First, to provide ambient air quality standard. Yes, the statement is correct. Second, to augment and evolve an effective air quality monitoring network in rural areas only. No, it's for the entire nation, not only for the rural areas. Third, to provide certification system for monitoring air quality. Yes, this statement is correct. So, the question is select the correct answer using the code given below. So, the correct answer would be C, 1 and 3. And coming back to the question of asked in UPSC examination, in the cities of our country, which among the following atmospheric gases are normally considered in calculating the value of air quality index? We know carbon dioxide was not in that list. Carbon monoxide was there, NO2 was there, sulfur dioxide was there, and methane was also not there. So the correct answer here would be 2, 3 and 4. Since UPSC has already asked a question on air quality index, hence this topic of air quality index as well as National Clean Air Program becomes very important with respect to your UPSC prelims examination. With this, let's move on to the next news. Now the next news appears as a snippet on page number 1 and as a full news on page number 7. The news reads, Centre proposes relaxation of coastal regulation zone norms. Now in this news, the central government has allowed India's coast to be made more accessible to tourism as well as for industrial infrastructure, and then also given individual states considerable leeway or independence to decide how they intend to plan such development. All these recommendations are according to a draft version of proposed modification to India's coastal regulation zone. These recommendations are on the basis of a committee headed by Shailesh Nayak, which in its report recommended several changes in India's coastal regulation zone notification of 2011. To understand the various changes made by this draft version of India's proposed modification of India's CRZ plan, first of all, let us understand about various coastal regulation zone as well as the concept of high tide line, low tide line and spring tide. As we can see, the CRZ areas are classified into 4 zones: CRZ1, CRZ2, CRZ3 and CRZ4. Here we see under CRZ1 that it is an area between the low tide line and high tide line. So let us also understand about this concept of low tide line and high tide line. Now high tide line is defined as line up to which highest tide reaches in spring tide. That is maximum limit to which this tide reaches. Whereas the low tide line is the limit up to which lowest tide recedes during spring tide. So the word spring tide becomes important. The tides which occurs during either full moon or new moon. Those tides are called spring tides. Thus, coming back to CRZ zones, as we can see, the CRZ1 zone, it says area between the low tide line and high tide line. Now this CRZ1 area, it are those areas that are ecologically sensitive and important, such as national parks, marine parks, sanctuaries, reserve forests, and areas rich in genetic diversities, and also areas likely to be inundated due to rise in sea level consequent upon global warming. However, important thing to note about CRZ1 is that no new constructions is permitted within this particular zone. Still, the CRZ regulation provides for 3 exceptions. New constructions related to projects of Department of Atomic Energy, pipelines conveying system including transmission lines, and exploration and extraction of oil and natural gas. Under CRZ2, this category includes areas that have already been developed up to or close to the shoreline. For this purpose, the term developed area is used for areas within municipal limits or in other legally designated urban areas. However, under CRZ2, strict regulations for new constructions are provided. As far as CRZ3 is concerned, areas that are relatively undisturbed and do not belong to the first 2 criteria. And CRZ4, which are coastal stretches in the Andaman and Nicobar, Lakshadweep and small islands, except those designated as CRZ1, CRZ2 or CRZ3. And in this, no new construction of building permitted within 200 meter of high tide line. So coming back to the changes made by the draft notification, as you can see the difference between 2011 notification and draft notification under 2018. Here it says ecotourism activities such as mangrove walks, tree huts and nature trails among others in identified stretches subject to permission. Here nature trails and ecotourism activity may be permitted under CRZ1 provided they conform to state approved coastal management plan. Next, it says there are now further subdivision within these four regions. So earlier, the 500 meter of CRZ was apportioned into four subdivisions. Now, further subdivisions within these four regions. Now, the word coastal zone has also been defined as a region from high tide line to 100 meter of the creek along tidal influence bodies such as bays, estuaries, rivers, backwaters, lagoons, ponds, etc., which are connected to the sea. Now, in this case, coastal regulation zone shall apply to the land between high tide line to 100 meters, whereas in the proposed law, this 100 meters has been changed to 50 meters. So, these are some of the changes which have been proposed in the coastal regulation zone. In this particular news, issues related to high tide line, low tide line, spring tide, as well as Salesh Nayak committee becomes important with respect to your prelims examination. With this, let's move on to the next news. The next news appears on page number 8. The news reads, "The soft power of India. A mere wish to be praised as a global or regional power should not be allowed to guide our foreign policy." First of all, let us understand this concept of soft power. It says soft power is a term coined by Joseph Nye Jr., which means the ability to harness the allure of culture and values of a country to enhance its strength and the ability to affect other countries by attraction and persuasion through its culture. Thus, this is a concept of soft power. In this article, Indian strategic community has envisioned India being a global power and a net security provided to others. However, according to the author, India needs to reconsider what role India intends for in international politics based on realistic perceptions rather than on mere rhetoric. According to the author in this article, India is a regional power but not a regional leader. In the past, India has got into the domestic politics of Sri Lanka, Maldives, Seychelles, and others. However, these involvement positioned India as regional power, but results from involvement did not alter India's global power image significantly. Thus, as per the author, the real goals of foreign policy should be on the lines of lifting poor from poverty, economic and social development, conduct of periodic elections at all levels of Indian democracy. All these will significantly help in raising India's soft power status. And in this respect, the author has also suggested, in terms of foreign policy, to avoid the pursuit of flattery and praise from the global community as goal of foreign policy, because it will not help in raising India's image from a regional power to a global leader. Thus, this article basically pertains to developing soft power of India on the world community. This topic becomes important in the international relations section of UPSC syllabus. With this, let's move on to the next news. The next news appears on page number 9. The news reads, "Is the Indian economy really that strong? The improving fundamentals owe more to favorable external circumstances than to domestic policy choices." In this news, the author suggests that the Indian economy is projected to grow at around 7% this year, and the economy's foundations have also strengthened in the last few years. For example, inflation has come down to the range of 4 to 5%. Current account deficit has also come down to around 1.5% of GDP, and India has also systematically built up its foreign exchange reserves, which as of now is a comfortable $420 billion. So these are the positives which can be taken with respect to projected Indian growth of economy at around 7%. However, there are still various vulnerabilities that may affect the growth in the future. Let's see these vulnerabilities one by one. Investment slowdown. The rate of investment has come down from 34% of GDP in 2014 to around 30% of GDP currently. The industrial production was earlier growing at around 6% in 2016 but plummeted to 2% by mid 2017, mainly due to demonetization. The next reason is slowdown in bank credit. Bank financing is important for growth in India. This is particularly true of small and medium sized enterprises and also parts of agricultural sector where the bulk of the labor force is employed. However, due to high NPAs, credit growth has slowed down. NPAs have doubled from about 5% of gross loans outstanding in 2015 to nearly 10%. Now, these NPAs have doubled. In this regard, due to high NPAs, even the Reserve Bank of India has forced banks to classify loans stringently. Another vulnerability which can be talked about is high fiscal deficit. The general government budget deficit, the combined budgets of central and state governments, it's still at 6.5% of GDP, which is still very high. Hence, there is a need to emphasize the need for caution before getting jubilant about the growth figures. In this respect, it is important to know that even though macroeconomic indicators such as inflation, current account deficit, forex reserves, etc. have improved, they still remain on a slippery ground. Decline in inflation, current account deficit has been mainly driven by external factors and not domestic factors. Hence, achievement of 7% growth requires that these vulnerabilities, as mentioned above, should be addressed and domestic economic conditions should improve so as to strengthen the macroeconomic variables. This news becomes important from the economy section of UPSC syllabus. In the past, questions have been asked on macroeconomic indicators, inflation, current account deficit, even forex reserves. Hence, this topic also becomes important from your prelims point of view. With this, let's move on to the next news. The next news also appears on page number 9. The news reads, still using chemical weapons. Now, this news is with respect to OPCW, or Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons. Now, straightforward question in the year 2016 was asked by the UPSC. The question read, with reference to Organization for Prohibition of Chemical Weapons, consider the following statements. It is an organization of European Union in working relations with NATO and WHO, that is World Health Organization. Thus, in this statement, you need to know about the OPCW. Second, it monitors chemical industry to prevent new weapons from emerging. Third, it provides assistance and protection to state or state parties against chemical weapon threats. Now, let us understand about certain basic facts about this OPCW, then we'll be able to solve this particular question asked in the year 2016. As we see, the Organization for Prohibition of Chemical Weapons is the implementing body of the Chemical Weapons Convention. Hence, this information becomes very important, which entered into force in 1997. As of today, OPCW has 192 member states who are working together to achieve a world free of chemical weapons. Now, this OPCW is an independent and autonomous international organization and has a working relationship with the United Nations. Now, the key provisions of this convention are destroying all existing chemical weapons under international verification by the OPCW, monitoring chemical industry to prevent new weapons from re-emerging, providing assistance and protection to state parties against chemical threats, and fostering international cooperation to strengthen implementation of convention and promote peaceful use of chemistry. Now, this news becomes important with respect to recent suspected chemical weapons attack by Syria, and also because of the reaction from United States of America. Thus, this particular convention has come back into news. Hence, this become important as it has been also asked in the previous years. Thus, this topic of OPCW becomes important. So, after going through the certain basic facts about this Organization for Prohibition of Chemical Weapons, let's go through the question again and try to solve that particular question asked by UPSC. The question reads, with reference to OPCW, consider the following statements. It is an organization of European Union in working relations with NATO and WHO. Now we know that this statement is incorrect because, as we have studied, that OPCW is an independent and autonomous institution and has a working relationship with the United Nations and not European Union or NATO. Second, it monitors chemical industry to prevent new weapons from emerging. As you can read in one of the key provisions of the convention, that monitoring chemical industry to prevent new weapons from re-emerging. Is it the exact statement which has been quoted in the statement of the question? Third, it provides assistance and protection to state parties against chemical weapon threats. You can read again, it providing assistance and protection to state parties against chemical threats. So these two statements, that is statement number 2 and statement number 3, becomes correct. So the question asked is, which of the statements given above is correct? We know that statement 2 and 3 is correct and 1 is incorrect. So the correct answer would be B. Thus, this topic of OPCW becomes important from our prelims perspective. With this, let's move on to the next news appears on page number 7. The news reads Minority Institutions Panel gets court relief. In this news, the Supreme Court has held that National Commission for Minority Educational Institutions has original jurisdiction to determine which institution should be granted minority status. And particularly, the Supreme Court said that the NCMEI Act empowers the Commission to decide all questions relating to status of an institution as a minority educational institution and to declare its status as such. So, in this news, let us understand about Article 30, which is also a fundamental right of minorities to establish and administer educational institutions. Before going through this particular fundamental right, let us go through two particular questions, one with respect to fundamental right under Article 30 and one with respect to National Commission for Minority Education. Let's see. The first question reads, consider the following statements. Right to establish educational institution only on grounds of religion is a fundamental right. Now, to answer this statement correctly, you need to understand the exact provision of Article 30. Second statement says, the state shall not discriminate in granting aid to minority educational institutions. Which of the statement given above are correct? Let's go back to Article 30 so as to understand what does the article say. Article 30 says, all minorities, whether based on religion or language, shall have the right to establish and administer educational institutions of their choice. Here the word is religion as well as language, and 30 clause 2 says the state shall not in granting aid to educational institutions discriminate against any educational institution on the ground that it is under the management of a minority, whether based on religion or language. Here we see under Article 30 there are two words mentioned with respect to minority educational institution, that is institutions based on either religion or language. Thus, these two words becomes important to know from a prelims point of view. Let's see the question again. It says, right to establish educational institution only on grounds of religion is a fundamental right. No, not only on grounds of religion, but also on grounds of language. Hence, this statement becomes incorrect. Second says, the state shall not discriminate in granting aid to minority educational institutions. Here we read that the state shall not discriminate. Thus, statement 2 is correct. Hence, the correct answer would be B. Now, with respect to the second question, which of the following statements about National Commission for Minority Educational Institution are correct? It is a constitutional body. Its members shall hold office for a term of 5 years. Can inquire into any complaints received regarding deprivation or violation of rights of minorities. To answer this particular question, we must know about National Commission for Minority Educational Institution. Let us understand certain key features about this National Commission for Minority Educational Institution. Here we see that the National Commission for Minority Educational Institution was established by this Act known as National Commission for Minority Educational Institution Act 2004. The aim and objective of the Act says that an Act to constitute a National Commission for Minority Educational Institutions, and section 3 particularly talks about constitution of such National Commission for Minority Educational Institutions by the central government. It says that the commission shall consist of a chairperson and 3 members to be nominated by the central government. Qualifications are, a person shall not be qualified for appointment as chairperson unless he is a member of a minority community and has been a judge of the High Court. As far as terms of office are concerned, every member shall hold office for a term of 5 years from the date on which he assumes office. Now let us see some of the functions and powers of this National Commission for Minorities. It says to advise the central government or any state government on any question relating to the education of minorities that may be referred to it. Inquire suo motu, that is on its own accord, on a petition presented to it by any minority education institution or by any person on its behalf regarding complaints regarding deprivation or violation of rights of minorities to establish and administer educational institutions of their choice, and any dispute relating to affiliation to the university and report its finding to the appropriate government. It can also intervene in any proceeding involving any deprivation or violation of educational rights of minorities before a court, to review safeguards provided by or under the Constitution to such minorities, to specify measures to promote and preserve the minority status and character of institutions of their choice established by minorities, to decide all questions relating to status of any institution. Now this particular section was under contention by the Supreme Court judgment. Make recommendations to the appropriate government for effective implementation of programs and schemes relating to minority educational institutions, and to such other acts and things as may be necessary, incidental, or conducive to the attainment of all or any of the objects of the commission. Thus, these becomes important from a prelims point of view. So, after going through these particular facts about National Commission for Minority Education, let's try to answer that question again. Which of the statements about National Commission for Minority Educational Institution is correct? It's a constitutional body. No, we saw that it was constituted under an act, hence it's a statutory body. Second, its members shall hold office for a term of 5 years. Correct, as was mentioned in the act itself. And it can inquire into any complaints received regarding deprivation or violation of rights of minorities. Yes, this is also correct. Thus, the correct answer would be 2 and 3. So here the correct option is C. So in this news, we saw with respect to minority institution felons get court relief regarding Article 30, that is right of minorities to establish and administer education institutions on grounds of religion and language, as well as about the National Commission for Minorities. Thus, this news becomes important from your prelims examination. Questions may be asked with respect to right of minorities to establish and administer educational institutions, since this is also one of the fundamental rights. With this, we come to an end to today's newspaper. Let's move on to the question for the day.